All right, here we go. Now I want to warn you, this video is a little bit longer than some of my demos that I've done in person. The reason for that, it would be just as long as if I was there. The reason it's a little bit longer is because this is the first day of something new. We're starting something new today, and so there's some things to tell you. And here's the thing that we're starting new. I'm going to go to the Creative Cloud app. Today begins the series that we're doing with Illustrator. So when you go to work on this assignment here that I'm going to give you in just a little bit, make sure that you start it with Illustrator. You do it with Illustrator. The artboard that I have for you to download from Google Classroom is an Illustrator file. The work has to be done in Illustrator. If you get confused and do it in Photoshop, it is not going to count. So I'm trying to stress for you, this is Illustrator. This is day one of Adobe Illustrator. And I want to show you, first of all, before we actually get into the assignment, I've got to show you a few differences. Like in Photoshop, this is Photoshop that you're looking at right now. And these are the kinds of things, you've seen these. These are things that I showed or things we've done. And these are what the projects look like, right? I'm just flipping through projects that if you were around, you've already seen them. They're not new, right? This is the kind of work that we were doing in Photoshop. Right? Okay. Now, I'm going to go over to Illustrator, and I want to see, the first thing I want you to see is look at, these are the kind of projects that we're going to be doing in Illustrator, and these do not look the same. These are very different. They're done a different way. It's a different kind of thinking, and it just challenges you in a different way. All right, this is mostly all the things that you see here are made out of shapes and lines and curves and a little bit of creative work with working with shapes and I'm going to teach you all of these things, but the projects look different. It's not the same kind of work. So if you're thinking, well, we're just going to keep doing the same thing we've been doing, well, no, we're not. All right, now I'm going to go back over to here to Photoshop, and I want to show you one of the ways that it is different, and I'm going to use my space thing to show you this. All right, so here I am in Photoshop. And I'm going to kind of I'll take my move tool here and I'll just kind of point the mouse to the back end of the Rocinante. That's one of the spaceships here. And I'm going to start zooming in. I'm going to do Control Plus on the keyboard. Let me move this over so we can see this kind of happen here. Control Plus and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, especially like on that back end of the spaceship right there. So I zoomed way in, right? And you can see this now. That in Photoshop, we were working in what is usually what's called a raster editing environment. And that's not going to be on a test or a quiz or anything, but raster means this. It means that the stuff that you're working with is actually made of pixels. Those little boxes of color that you're looking at right now, which are the back end of that spaceship, that's what's actually making the spaceship, right? It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. When you take a picture with your cell phone camera, what it does is grab all these pixels, all these little different boxes that are made of different colors, and it kind of maps out where each box of each color goes, and it knows where to put them, and so it stores them that way. And so this is what you've got, right? You've got all these tiny little boxes. I'm moving the picture around a little bit. So you got all these tiny little, little bitty boxes that are slightly different colors, and when you zoom out and you look at the whole thing, that's what the picture looks like. And we were looking at that back end of the one spaceship there. Now, if I switch this over to Illustrator, and I'll just use this, I'll use this blue guy for an example, and I'll start zooming in the same way. And let me move it to where there's some difference in color. I'll keep zooming in, zooming in, zooming in. Do you see any pixels? You do not, and you never will. You can zoom in as far as you want. You're never going to see any pixels when we're working in Illustrator because it's what's called a vector illustration program. And again, that's not going to be on a test or a quiz, but it's a different thing than working in Photoshop. We're not working with pixels. And when you were in Photoshop, I bet there were some times when you were working with a picture and you did Control-T transform and you stretched the picture out and it got all fuzzy and blurry and grainy and all that kind of thing. And that's because you can only stretch pixels so far. They don't stretch forever. But when you're working in Illustrator on something like this, you can take what you made and stretch it out as big as you want. And it should, if your computer can handle it, it should still be fine, right? Unless you make your computer crash because you made it so big. All right, so what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to get out of Photoshop. I'm going to close Photoshop. Got to tell it there's some things I don't want to say. And I'm actually also going to go ahead and close Illustrator. I'll get back to Illustrator here in a minute. See, no one saving anything there. And all right, and now we're sitting back on the Creative Cloud app. Now, my next destination is going to be Google Classroom, right? Because now I want to turn our attention to the first assignment that you're going to do. It's called Build with Shapes, and I want to show you how it's going to work a little bit. Okay. The main idea behind the assignment is not a complicated idea. I have provided an artboard here on Google Classroom. I'm going to zoom up and show you where this thing is here. Sorry, I zoomed up too far. It's right over here, this Build with Shapes file right here. So it's an Adobe Illustrator file, and I'm going to show you how to download it and open it. And there's a bunch of shapes on it. The idea behind the assignment is you make something out of those shapes. That's it. Now, I'm going to show you some tips and things like that, and there are some things that go along with the assignment. So let's just get to work on let me zoom this back out. Let's get to work on the tips that I have for you about how to work with this. Okay, so right here on this Build with Shapes, I'm going to go ahead and click that. And it's not going to look like anything. When it opens up in this window, it's going to look like, well, that's just an empty document. It's not really, but just stick with me. All right, so we've done this before. This is not new. I'm going to go up here on the top right-hand side where it says More Actions. I'm going to open it in a new window. We've done this before. This is not new. And then I am going to download it. We did this with a lot of Photoshop files. A little three-dot menu in the corner. Open a new window, and then download it right there. It's going to go into your downloads folder. That's where it's going to be located. All right, so I should have that downloaded now. Now what I'm going to do is go back to the Adobe Creative Cloud app, which you all have run. You should have that and have it running. And remember, this is where you've got to get this right. Don't open Photoshop and try to do this in Photoshop. I do not want that. It's not going to work well. Don't do it that way. This has to be Illustrator. All right, we're switching. This is the first day of a new thing. All right, Illustrator. Sorry if I'm overemphasizing that, but I have people all the time can just kind of mess up, and they'll open Photoshop and try to do this assignment in Photoshop, and they get all confused and it doesn't work well because it's not supposed to be Photoshop. It's Illustrator. All right, so I'm going to open Illustrator. Got to give it a second when you first open it. It's one of those that tends to get a little bit faster every time you open it, but your computer has to get used to it. So just hang in there, and it will open up. Here's your splash screen. This is what it's probably going to look like that, and bingo. All right, you might get a What's New box or something that pops up here. I use Illustrator a lot, so I'm not seeing that box, but you might get a What's New box or something. Just close that. So what you want to do, you're going to open a file, right? Because I gave you should have downloaded that file from Classroom. So you're going to open. And I'm going to go look in my Downloads folder. And there it is. It's called Build with Shapes. It's an Adobe Illustrator file. And it's coming. And here it is. Now, I don't know exactly how it'll all be set up on yours. If you press down the space bar, you can scoot this artboard around like this. Hold the space bar down and just use your mouse, and you can scoot this around. And you can do Control plus on your keyboard. Hold the Control key and tap the plus sign, and you can zoom in. Control minus, you can zoom out. And so that could help you right there. So yeah, hold the space bar to move it around. Control plus, zoom in. Control minus, zoom out. Now what you've got here, the big rectangular white empty area here that's called the artboard, and that's where you're going to do your work. Now surrounding the artboard here are a whole bunch of shapes and lines and curves and things like that. And that's remember, the idea on this assignment is you have to make something out of those shapes. It's like playing with blocks when you were a kid. right? Here's what you got, and you got to build with them. Now I'm going to show you some tricks that I think are going to help. The only tool that you're really going to need is this selection tool, the black arrow that's at the top of the toolbar. In fact, you're really pretty much limited to that tool. And sometimes I have people do this assignment and they'll find the paintbrush or whatever and they'll start adding other things. Don't do that. All right? I hope you hear me. Don't do that. That's not what this assignment is about. The challenge on this assignment is to take what you've got and make something of it. That's what I want to see you do. I want to see you take these shapes, and I'm gonna show you some things that you can do with them. So just keep watching. Hang on. All right. So let's say that I want to do something with this star. So I'm just using my black arrow, my selection tool, and I'm just going to drag it over here and put it on the artboard. This is where you should build right here. This big rectangle is the artboard. Now notice that first of all, the thing I want you to see is that when you click on something with the black arrow tool, it's like Control T in Photoshop, but you don't have to hit Control T on the keyboard. You can just grab a handle and just make something bigger or smaller. If you hold the Shift key down when you're sizing it, it locks in the proportions of the object. If you let go of the Shift key, you can make it skinnier or flatter or whatever. But if you hold the Shift key, it locks down the proportions and keeps it in proportion to what it was before. So you can make things bigger or smaller. All right. You can obviously move things around if you want to. You can, if you want to rotate something, you can sneak your mouse up on a corner handle, and then when you see that little curved arrow, you can rotate an object and spin it like this. Okay. Control Z is undo, just like always, just like it was in Photoshop. If you do something and you want to undo it, you can just hit Control Z on your keyboard. Now, over here on the right-hand side, there's a Properties panel. And the thing that I want to show you on the Properties panel right now is the fill and stroke. Right now, this star is filled with white and stroked with black. Stroke is the outline. So I can come over here to the right-hand side, and I can click on the white box on the fill, and I get several colors here. I'll show you, in other lessons as we go along, I'll show you where you can get all the colors that you want. But for right now, we can just kind of keep it simple and there's a variety of colors here, so let's work with that. Okay, so I'll click on that white box, and if maybe I want that star to be yellow. So if I just click yellow, it's filled with yellow. I set the fill color to yellow. So don't go like looking for a bucket or try to take the paintbrush and say, I'm going to paint it yellow. That's not how it works in Illustrator. You just select the object and set its fill color over here on the right-hand side. Now you can also play around with the stroke. Right now it's got a black stroke that is a little over 10 points here. But I can, if I bump up, what I'm doing here is I'm bumping up the thickness of the stroke, and you can see what's happening to it. Now that's really super thick, and I think that's way too thick. There's also a menu over here for stroke thickness, and you can just drop that menu and pick something that you like. Like if I want the black outline to be 5 points thick, they're called points. So I've got a yellow fill and a 5-point black stroke. Now the stroke doesn't have to be black. I can click where that little black box is right there, and I can say, well, what if I want the stroke to be red? There we go. So now I have a red outline around the yellow star. It's kind of pinkish a little bit, but oh well, it's fine. Here's a more red. So you see the idea over here, that fill and stroke box right there will help you control things like color. Now I'm going to put that back to black because I kind of like the black outline better, but you can do whatever you want. All right, now let's look at another thing. I told you, colors and bigger and smaller, and your colors are going to be found over here on the right-hand side. That's not the only place to find color, but that's a good place to start off with. What if you're building something and you want more stars, right? Over here around the artboard, I didn't give you like 2 or 3 or 4 stars, so here's what you do. On your keyboard, you press down the Alt key. Now the Alt key is located right next to the space bar. There are 2 of them. It's ALT, Alt, right? Look for ALT, press it, and then take that black arrow tool. Remember, you got the black arrow tool. Take it and drag the star, or whatever shape you're working on. Hold the Alt key and drag it. Hold the Alt key and drag it. You can make as many copies as you want, right? So if you're building something and you want multiple copies of something, then you certainly can have as many copies as you like. If you make extra copies and you think, well, gosh, I made too many. I got carried away and I made too many. What do? You can just hit the delete key or the backspace key. You can click an object, and when it's selected, you can tell it's selected. It's got that box around it. And so you can hit either the backspace or the delete key, and you can get rid of objects. So if you hold the Alt key and drag it with the black arrow, press Alt and drag it, use your mouse, click, drag, you make extra copies. And if you want to get rid of a copy, just select it and hit either backspace or delete, and that will get rid of it. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you? Let's bring over this triangle here, and I'm going to fill the triangle with like a blue color, and I'm going to make it bigger. There we go. Now let's say that, notice that as I move the triangle around these stars, the triangle is in front of the star. And you could have a situation where you think, well, I don't want the triangle to be in front of the star. I want the triangle to be behind the star. So can I do that? And the answer to that is yes, you can. Over here on the right-hand side, there's an arrange button here. There's other ways to do it as well, and we'll learn them as we go. But there's an arrange button over here on the right-hand side. And then you have things like bring to front, bring forward, send backward, send to back. If I do send to back right now, then you see what happened to the blue triangle is now behind this because it's in the back, right? These things are all kind of stacked up in an order, and by sending it to the back, it is now that blue triangle is now behind the yellow star. Or I could go over to arrange and say, well, I want to bring that to the front. Boom. And if you have multiple things that are stacked up, that's where these buttons that say bring forward and send backward can be kind of helpful as well. If you keep working with it a little bit, you can get you can get the order of the objects that you want if you just work at it some. All right, what else do I want to tell you here? We've talked about size and color and rotation and duplicating and front and back. I'm going to hop back here for a moment to Google Classroom and just show you that the other thing, a lot of these little tips that I'm showing you are here on this. They're here on this Google Doc that goes along with this assignment. And we're coming down the home stretch on what I'm going to show you. I told you this was going to be a little bit longer today because of it being the first day of some things. I want to pull up, just give me a second here. I'm going to pull up the help page that goes along with this. All right, we'll zoom up on that a little bit. All right, so I want to come down here and look at so we talked about resizing and keeping proportions and rotating and duplicating and changing color and changing stroke weight and stacking order and zooming in, zooming out. So all of these tips and everything that I have on the handout, I've already I've showed you. So now I need to show you, exactly how this is going to work. Let's get back over here to Illustrator. And I am going to, actually I had it open earlier so I can get to it really quick. I'm going to show you an example. Here it comes. Let me get that in more of a full screen view. All right. Now, this ladybug thing that I made. See, again, I said your challenge on this assignment is you have to take those shapes that you have, like if I do a handful of Control Z's here on, right, I'm just doing Control Z's. I'm just undoing what I had done in the, that's kind of slow, sorry. Almost there. Boom. There. So when you first download this thing, it's going to look like this. I could have done that a lot faster, sorry. That's what it's going to look like when you start, and you got to make something. So I took this exact set of shapes right here, and I kind of played around with it, and I made this. This is what I made as an example. I got another example I'm going to show you in a minute. Now, here, there are a couple of things that go along with the assignment that I want you to see. You can't just like make something, just slap something together in 2 minutes and then say, I'm done. Do you think I ever am going to be happy with that in this class? No. So here's the deal on this. I've got, this is a little bit about how to do it. You download that artboard and you use the shapes on the artboard to build something. A design, a pattern, a scene, a creature, a character, whatever. Make it fit on the artboard. Okay. You don't have to use all of the shapes. When you get done, if there are shapes that you didn't use, you could just delete them. Don't delete them too soon. Wait until you're done. I just showed you all the tips and everything, so I'm not going to worry about that. And you're limited to using the items provided on the artboard. You can't go get something from the internet on this assignment. You can't use other tools in Illustrator on this assignment. Your job here is to just build something out of the shapes that you've been provided. All right, and here's how it's going to be graded. So pay attention. If your final design uses less than 15 parts, then you get a 30 out of 50. This is a 50-point assignment. 30 out of 50 is a D-, and I hope you're shooting for better than that because I think you can do better than that. If your final design uses 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, it's in this range right here, then now your points are going up. You're up to 35 out of 50. That's a C-. If your final design uses 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, you're getting better. You used a little more stuff in your design that you're making, and you're up to 40 out of 50. That's a B-. Here's your magic number for getting an A+ on this. And you can do it. Don't sit there and say you can't do it, because you can. Using 25 or more parts will get you 50 out of 50. Now let me show you exactly what I mean when I say 25 or more parts. Here's how I'm going to grade this thing, like my example of the ladybug. When I download yours and I start to grade it, I'm going to do this. Okay, that circle, that's 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that was a part, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You get the idea? Everything that is a part of what you make counts. Even if it's a duplicated shape, like these circles down here that make the dots on the belly of the bug, those are all the same thing. They're all circles, but they all count. And these lines here, rectangles, lines, those are all the same thing, but they all count. The ovals, these two ovals here, all the same thing, but they all count, right? Everything counts that you use. So, don't try to sit there and say, well, it's so hard to get 25 pieces. No, it's not. It isn't. It really, all you got to do is a little bit of thinking, a little bit of imagination, and you can do it, right? I just did a bunch of Control-Z's and I put it back together. I'm going to, real quick here, I'm going to open. I know that you're probably sitting there saying, gee, this is taking forever, but you know what? You're not going to die. I'm going to open up another thing out of my Illustrator set here. Okay, same assignment, right? Let me get that on a bigger view. Same exact assignment. I started off with this very set of shapes that you see right here, and I wound up with something completely different from the ladybug, right? This is not even nearly the same as the ladybug. And again, here's what I'm going to do when I grade it. I'm going to start pulling things apart. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every stitch counts. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We're going to make 25 easy. Right. So I'm going to do some Control-Z's and put Frankenstein back together here. So that's the assignment. That's the job. And you don't have to use every piece. I don't know if I've got... Yeah, I got this idea here. So I also here's a third example. And you don't have to make 3. Don't get confused and say, well, I have to do 3 of them. No. You don't have to do 3, you do 1. But I'm using this one to show you something else. I made the rocket. I started with the same exact set of shapes, right? The same as what I gave you. And I built the rocket. I changed some colors and I duplicated things, and I sized them and moved them, and I built what I wanted to build. But I got all these other shapes around here that I did not use, right? I didn't want them. I didn't want to use them. I could have used a star up there, but I didn't want to. Okay. So you don't have to use all the shapes, but when you get all done, it's a good idea to come along here and say, well, okay, I'm done. I built the rocket. Okay, good. I'm not using the star, so I'm going to hit the delete key. I don't want this rounded rectangle. I don't want this hexagon. I don't want this. And I'll just delete all those extra shapes. And that leaves me with just what I did mean to make, and that's the rocket, right? So here's 3 different examples of this assignment: the ladybug or the bug, and the Frankenstein, and the rocket. But you're going to do your own thing, and don't just do what I do. Use your imagination. Make your own thing. All right. It's time to bail on this. It's time for you to get to work. By the way, it's a 2-day thing. You have time in this first class period where you're seeing this, and then you have time in the next. You'll have all of the next class period. So 2-day deal. Off you go.